Yeah. So how's the start of your year been? Because you're back on tour in March, right?
Yeah, it's been a
Mm.
really good start to the year. Just kind of getting ready for this tour, slowly putting out music.
Mm.
I'm in the midst of putting out my third full-length record, so I've been doing the singles game for a really long time, and we're getting close to the album release. But yeah, just a lot of that kind of work. Launching the release of the tour announcement was a lot of work, and now kind of like rehearsing every day for this tour.
Yeah.
You spend so much time talking about these shows, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I actually have to play all
Shit,
these
I've got to
shows.
do
Like I
them.
need
Yeah.
to yeah, I need to like actually practice this stuff as well.
Yeah. Are you going with a band or are you on your own?
Yeah, so my fiddle player's coming out with me, and then I'm bringing an
Cool.
upright bassist, so it'll be like a trio, an all-female trio, and then my friend Lydia is going to open most of these shows as well.
That's really cool. So are you a resolutions person? Have you had any like 2024 resolutions?
Not as much. I have like really intense daily habits. Like I journal every day, I read every day. I try to do like walking every day with my dog, who will probably make several appearances during this
Rosie,
podcast.
for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, her name is Rosie. Yeah, she's a little terror. But so I kind of do that all the time to where like when it gets time to like make big resolutions, I just feel like I don't think I can add anything else. Like I have nothing
Yeah,
else
yeah.
to add. I physically can't do more, and like I probably should, but I can't.
Yeah. I mean, I normally don't, but as I was saying off air, my New Year's resolution this year was to reach out to one person a week that I really admire, that I want on the podcast, that I think would immediately say no or ignore me. And you are the first one I'm recording that said yes, but a few have
What?
said yes. So it's like you don't
That's
ask, you don't
awesome.
get, and all that. So thank you so
I
much for
feel
being
like
here.
most people want to talk about themselves. So I feel like you're gonna have good success with this.
Yeah, I think the problem I found so far is when I'm dealing with agents or publicists, I kind of just get stonewalled. But actually, when I reach out to people personally, it's a bit better. Um,
Yeah, that makes
yes.
sense.
So I just want to explain to the listeners how I found out about Andrea's music. So I was in New York in, was it like April time? I think you were playing those gigs, April, May, something like that.
Mhm.
And I was seeing one of my favorite artists, the tallest man on earth, for I think the fifth time at that point. And you were supporting, and then I got back to the UK and messaged you on Instagram. I was like, I've listened to the song Portland 58 times in the last 3 days. It's becoming a problem.
Okay, that is so sweet. Thank you for coming to those shows. I didn't know you were such a huge Tallest Man fan. That's so cool.
Huge. We'll get into that later. I'll try not to mention him too much, but
That's okay.
um but yeah, just for the listeners, kind of a little whistle stop tour of how you got into this path, because you're from a musical family, right? Because your brother
Yeah,
does some arrangements for you and things like that. But how did it all start for you?
definitely.
How did it all start for you, Andrea von
Yeah,
Kampen?
for sure. So yeah, I grew up in a really musical family. My dad is a choir director, and my mom sings and plays instruments. And then yeah, my brother is a bit older than me, and he kind of paved the way. He went to school for composition and plays piano, and just sort of like showed me that there's a world in which you can make a living at this art, and it's just sort of like the family business. I have a lot of friends now who were like greatly discouraged from doing art as a living,
Hmm.
and that just was never a part of the conversation in my family growing up. So it was sort of like this is the only thing we do. So from a very young age I was singing a lot, singing in choir, and then I started to play guitar in high school or so, and kind of got more serious with it high school into college when I started to write things. I knew that like I could play cover songs and that would be nice and lovely, but that if I really wanted a career, I needed to write my own things. And
Yeah.
I really had like no idea what I wanted to say, but it was sort of like I'm just going to start. And so that was kind of the beginning of writing music. And yeah, it really yeah, just kind of kept happening. I just kept writing music and kept releasing it, and people kept listening in some form or another, and that's kind of how it all started.
So was it kind of a definite decision, or was it always, as you say, you've come from a family where art was encouraged? Was it kind of just by the time you got to that stage, it was like, well, this is what I do, and this is what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, well, I went to college. My first 2 years, I went for a music ed degree because I was sort of like, I know I want to do music, but I should really have a backup. I should really be able to teach music if I can't make a living at music. And then I got so sick of studying music ed because I knew I didn't want to teach it. And I went to Nashville for a year. I transferred to a school in Nashville that was like going to help me do commercial voice and songwriting. And at that
Interesting.
school, I realized there is no really real way to teach this. Like this is kind of funny that this is a major at all. Like this is kind of a joke. And I realized like, oh, if I want to do this, I just have to do this. Like I
Mm.
can't have this thing where I say I'm going to be a teacher if it doesn't work out. Like I just need to do this. So I went back to the school I started at. I transferred back home, and this school is the school my dad taught at. So I was really lucky to have free tuition. And I remember I went into the class advisor person's office and I was just like, how do I get out of here in 1 year? Like, it doesn't need to be a productive degree. It
Mhm.
doesn't need to be a degree that has a job after it, but I've put in 3 years of college. How can I just have some stupid piece of paper when this is over?
So I have
And
some qualification. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it was like, well, you can have a BA in music. And I was like, great. And they're like, well, you won't have a job when this is over. I was like, I know, it's okay.
Mm.
And so that last year I really had one foot out the door. I would play as many shows as possible throughout the week within the Lincoln Omaha area. And then on the weekends, I'd be trying to play like Kansas City, Chicago, Des Moines. I'd be showing up to like physics at 8 a.m. on Monday, exhausted and barely passing
Jeez.
any of these classes. But I just knew like this is just a loophole to get, to not have wasted 3 years. And as soon as this is over, like I'm going to be doing this. And so I need to have as much of a foot out the door as possible so that this is more of an easy transition for me when I graduate.
Mm. It's always that cliche, but it's true, and it's advice that I got told when I was like 17, because I'm an actor and I went to drama school, but I got good grades and kind of could have gone to university. But I was thinking, oh, should I have a plan B? Should I do it later? And it's like, if you have a plan B, kind of do the plan B, because the
You'll do the
career,
plan B.
yeah, because the career is fucking hard, and if you're not
Yeah.
in it for the long run and you kind of have to do it to stay,
Yeah.
spiritually sane, I guess, then do the
Yeah.
plan B.
When you
Um,
actually kind of need jobs that don't take creative energy from you. So, like,
mm,
if you're going to have to work a job, get something that's mindless and doesn't take any creative energy.
totally.
Whereas, like, if you have a plan B to be a music teacher, to be that, actual career, it's going to be so hard to do both.
Because you've kind of got a foot in both doors, like you want to be the other side. Yeah, it's very, yeah, I agree with that. But how was the transition to kind of making it a career in terms of like monetarily? Because I guess
Yeah.
streaming's been a massive thing for you. I have been on the periphery of, um, I play live in London a lot and things like that, but I've always said, mainly out of fear, that music is my glorified hobby rather than than actually pursuing it. But I know a lot of people that are pursuing it, but I still don't know kind of how the streaming thing works monetarily. So
Yeah.
how did that come about for you? What was the progression with that?
Totally. So after I graduated, I got a job at a parochial school teaching K through 5 music.
Hmm.
And I was able to work it out to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That way I could be on the road Friday through Sunday. And I did that for 2 years. And so, I mean, I was making almost no money, but my rent was very cheap. And I think I was legitimately paying like $300 a month for rent. And I
Damn.
think I was making like $900 a month. And so it was like, I really embraced, like, this is how you live on almost nothing. And
Hey,
I did that for.
we're called starving artists for a reason here, you
Yes,
know?
exactly. And nothing makes you hustle like being incredibly poor.
Mhm.
Like nothing makes you want to get your crap together. So, yeah, I did that for 2 years, and then after about 2 years of that schedule, I was able to sort of justify, okay, my art is making more than I am making teaching K through 5 music 3 days a week. And yeah, it was starting to be a combination of shows and streaming and, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, none of it pays great. You need a lot
Mm.
to really have that be something that you can hang your hat on. It's also incredibly unpredictable. I've had ranges of 200,000 monthly listeners, and less than that, 50,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, up to 750,000 monthly listeners. And those swings are big. And
That
so
was the
like
month that I listened to Portland about 365.
that was just you.
That was
If
just
you could
me.
if
You're
you could
welcome.
keep that up, that would be nice for me.
Don't worry, I will, when the new album comes out, I'm sure I will.
But the swings are incredibly big. And so even just saying like, well, now I'm making enough from streaming, I can quit. It's very precarious. So building up the live shows has been important as well, and taking those opening slots and trying to grow a following, and also things like Patreon and physical merch. And it's such a strange world that we're living in right now, because I mean, even in the past 6 months, 1 year, I've had a handful of friends post, a cover song or a soundbite of a song and have millions of eyes on it, which is amazing. But those followers are so passive.
Mm,
And what you really want to make a living in this, career, is invested followers who buy
mhm.
tickets, who buy merch,
Yeah.
who keep listening. They're not following you for 30 seconds of a soundbite that you made 2 years ago. Like, they're following you because they love your music.
Mm.
And so trying to focus on building that kind of fanship, even though it's slow and it's unimpressive. And if you said like, would you rather blow up? I'd be like, yeah. But trying to prioritize real fans and getting out on the road and meeting real people and playing, 45 minutes instead of 40 seconds for them,
Mm.
I think is sort of the path to building an actual stable income as well.
This is a difficult one to ask, because I'm an actor primarily, and there's always kind of, with actors, you have a preference between, are you primarily a stage actor, you're primarily a screen actor, and it's not the same thing. But is there a preference for you between playing live and making an album, or are they just both as beautiful in different ways for you?
Yeah, it's such a different headspace. Like,
Hmm.
being on tour and playing live is sort of like going to summer camp. Like, you're going to be exhausted and you're going to feel like crap every day, and you're going to eat terrible food that's going to make you feel sick. And yet, like, every night you're going to go to bed and be like, I can't wait to do this again. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
this is so great. Like, I just feel high from like this performance high. And making an album is sort of like going to grad school. It's slow and it's tedious, and there's not like these big highs,
It's not
it's like,
immediately
okay,
exciting. Yeah.
yeah, it's not like the childhood camp anymore. It's like, do it again. You can
Mm.
do it better. Let's listen back. Let's edit it down. Let's layer it 6 times. Okay, we just spent 8 hours tracking guitar. Great. I'll see you tomorrow. And
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, we have the strings coming in, and it's like a process, and it's a layering, and it takes time, and it's more like a marathon.
Mm.
And it feels like there's nothing more exciting than getting those mixes back and hearing your vision come to life, like in the hands of real instrumentalists and things. But you just really have to embrace the long game of it. It's such a marathon, and you're not going to get, that's the thing that's so weird about like playing live, is you get immediate feedback. You're
Mm.
immediately like, oh, I did a good job. People are happy. Whereas like you make an album for 3 months, 4 months, whatever, and you don't get feedback for like a year and a half.
Mhm.
And then the feedback is so slow. It takes forever for people to like listen to these songs, for them to become something people are excited about. And it's like two completely different jobs. It's really weird.
Yeah. Do you? I was very interested in this because I've seen other interviews with you, but I didn't quite get an understanding of it. Do you record the guitar and vocals initially, and then you send it off because your brother does arrangements for you? Does that how it works? Does it then come back and you record again with the arrangements? I'm just thinking the thought of like, with all those beautiful arrangements behind you, do you never hear that when you're in the studio to play
Yeah.
along to?
So I will write a song and then send it to David, just guitar vocal, just like a lo-fi recording that I've made at home.
Mhm.
And then he does an entire arrangement on that with like MIDI. So it's all pretend instruments. And then from there, we sort of have this roadmap when we get into the studio, and then we build out all those arrangements with real instruments.
Cool.
And then, so I'll track guitar first, usually, unless it's like a piano based song. And then the last thing I do is add vocals. So I will be singing to the entire arrangement when I sing, like the final
Right.
takes that you hear.
Yeah, that's so cool. It must be amazing hearing that, because a similar thing is there's a thing, because I grew up in doing musical theater, and there's a thing called a sitz probe, which is basically the final bit before dress rehearsal where the entire orchestra comes in, and you've been rehearsing and getting this thing off the ground just with backing tracks and just with a pianist, and then suddenly you've got this wall of sound, and that's, yeah, it's such an amazing experience. I miss doing
It
musicals.
sounds amazing.
I haven't done musicals
Um,
for years.
what do you do? Are you more stage or film?
Primarily stage. I mean, I do primarily voiceovers and stage work here in the
Nice.
UK, but I would love to get into TV. I've done a little bit of TV, I did a couple of things, and I'd love to get into film, but it's a tough one. I think it's getting less so, but in the UK industry, you can very quickly, if you have so many stage credits, you can very quickly become, oh, well, they're a stage actor. So we kind of
Mm,
don't see them as much for TV stuff. And even more so, actually, the other way around, TV actors, primarily screen actors who want to do stage, it's even more so because there's so much technicality that goes into, being able to do 8 shows in 6 days of, a Shakespeare play that they kind of don't
yeah.
trust. I think the problem is the industry, the people who run it, it's an industry, a creative industry run by generally uncreative people. So so they don't trust creatives very much. So
I
it's like you,
feel that.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. So it's a creative industry run by money men, and it's
Hmm.
it's it's tough. Um, but I've actually found that being around musicians and performing live and seeing people that are pursuing this as a career, there's a slight difference with being an actor, because, and I don't know if you think this, but I found that there was somewhat more of a community among musicians, and I don't know if it's because you're writing your own stuff and it's your product, it's your stuff. So whereas with actors, it's kind of like, pardon me, it's kind of, oh, well, they've got that part, so I didn't get that part, kind of thing. Whereas I found with musicians, it's like, fuck, I wish I'd written that song. That's fucking great. Like, do you find that? Do
Yeah.
you find a sense of community? Because you've worked with some great musicians.
Absolutely. I think it can be very collaborative. I
Mhm.
think the worst thing for musicians is like sitting at home and being on social media and seeing everybody post their success and being like, "Oh, why didn't I get that? Why didn't I get that?" But
Yep.
then like you call up that person, you talk to them and you're like, "Wow, like we are all dealing with the same thing. Like
Yeah.
we are all sort of lying about our lives online and then like we talk to each other and we're all feeling the same things."
Yeah.
And yeah, like we all kind of have a similar goal, I think, of like creating art that matters and like
Mm.
connecting with people and writing things that people care about. And so, yeah, like it can be so collaborative. And then, once you hear that great song, it's like, oh, I can't wait to cover that. Oh, I can't
Yeah.
wait to play that live. I can't wait to end my set with that. And like,
Yeah.
then people will say, like, whose song was that? And you can say, oh, that was my friend's song. Like, check them out. And I think it is less competitive because what we're competing for, we don't know. Like
Yeah.
there is literally no, this is
There's
the
no
Wild
kind of
West,
end
like,
goal. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
like we're
so
not all
interesting.
trying to get the same role. Like we're all just trying to like feed ourselves and find healthcare, like
Yeah.
we're all in this together. So I think it is less competitive, although there are moments where I think it's very easy to be envious of what like the successes people are getting and
Yeah.
sort of wondering like, oh my gosh, why are people connecting with this on such a massive level? Like these songs aren't even interesting. Like it's easy to get in that headspace too.
Yeah, I think staying in any artistic field, but bitterness can be kind of the start of a death knell of a long career. And I had it a few years out of drama school. Yeah, that sense of why are people connecting? Why you just don't understand. And then you realize I don't know if you find this, but when you talk to those people where a song's popped off or they've been in a massive show, TV show, film, whatever, and you talk to them and it's often not how they imagined it. I guess it can be dangerous to have this North Star view of a creative career where it's, well, when I get to that, it's going to be amazing and I'm going to be happy. Actually, you
Yeah.
talk to people and it's kind of like sometimes it just propels their insecurities that they had already and it's now magnified.
Yeah, I think there's so much to this, like, blowing up maybe like before you're ready, like
Mm,
blowing up in a way where like you have a great 30-second sound bite, but like, can you play an hour and a half of a
mm,
show every night? Like, are you ready to tour for weeks on end? Like, maybe not. Maybe that came a little too soon. And when I've been on tour now for months on end the last year or so, and talking to other people who have been sort of working with the people that are the TikTok stars, the people that are,
Yeah.
popping off on TikTok and just expressing things like they didn't know where to plug in their guitar. Like they never played a live show before. And it's
Fucking
like,
hell.
yeah. And it's like, man, I don't envy that. Like I feel grateful that I've sort of been able to grow as the audience has shown up to
Yeah.
where like I'm not being put in something I'm not ready for. But also I think there is such an attitude of trying to remember like why you ever wanted to do this in the first place. Was it because like you hated all your friends and you were jealous of them, or was it because like you just wanted to like play that role
Yeah.
or write that song? And it's so easy to sort of only look ahead at what you don't have. And my friend and I were just sending voice memos on WhatsApp yesterday about this, because she's an opera singer and she's been busting her butt trying to get roles, and she finally got into a company. And it's just so easy to be like, okay, great, but why do I not have blah blah blah? And I'm looking back 5 years ago, and all the questions of when will I have this, when will I have that, they've all been answered. And yet like I don't feel any more satisfied than I did 5 years
Really.
ago. It's just new
Yeah.
questions. And so it's like it's good to keep propelling forward, but also like no matter what success you get, if you don't change the way you perceive things, it will never be satisfying. If you are unsatisfied now, no amount of success will make you satisfied. Like you have to figure out in yourself, how am I going to feel good about what I'm doing? And it shouldn't have anything to do with the accolades, because none of those are long-term satisfying.
Yeah. I think the tough thing when you're starting out that I found was because we're in a system, just the way the world works, capitalist system, whatever you want to say, that has certain markers for success. And when I say, and I do now, but I didn't for years, I didn't say I was an actor. I would lie if someone asked me and say I was in computer software, just so no one would ask me any
It's
further
easier
questions.
that way though,
Yeah,
right?
no one's
Like...
gonna go, oh, what's that like? So but I do now. But you do sometimes get this kind of look of, because I think most people don't, and it's not their fault, but they don't know the intricacies of how tough this career is. So they think of an actor as Tom Cruise, or a musician as Bruce Springsteen, kind of thing. And actually 98% of people doing that and doing it successfully often are not that.
It's so funny you say that, because in my mind, I've built it up that like anyone who lives in the major markets, London, New York, LA, never has to contend with these stupid questions, because like you live in a market where people get it. Whereas like I live in the middle of nowhere and no one here is doing this. And I get all these dumb questions, but it's interesting because everybody does. Like
Yeah.
no matter where you live,
No.
this
It
is a thing. And I think it's because like what you said, like if you're an actor, you're Tom Cruise. If you're a musician, you're Taylor Swift. Like I would say on a weekly basis, someone asks me my thoughts on Taylor Swift, like as a way to connect with me. And it's like, I don't have an opinion. Like this is
Yeah.
a very, very different thing what I'm
Yeah.
doing. And it's like, I think just so many people kind of exist in the mainstream. And so the idea of like doing music, but doing it at a smaller level, not selling out stadiums, but being in clubs and touring and making a living, is very hard for them to understand. And
Yeah.
I mean, I was listening to a podcast when I was on tour, and it was a podcaster talking about seeing a show at the Troubadour in LA, which is like, really iconic venue. I don't know, maybe 700 capacity. To me, that's like a big venue.
Yeah.
And the podcaster was like, oh, it was just a tiny, tiny little venue,
Intimate
tiny
setting.
little intimate setting. And I'm
Fuck
like, oh
you.
my gosh, this is so annoying. Like, and it's just people's perspectives is just so different than, from what they see, and
Yeah.
you really have to get into explaining it for them to get it. And then it's sort of like, by the time you've explained all of it, they're very uncomfortable.
Yeah, totally. And it's so innocent, and they're doing it. They're kind of interesting because it's something other than the norm. But I suppose, yeah, it doesn't matter what market you're in. If you're not around people who are trying to do this, then there's a misconception around it. I was going to get into your Taylor Swift thing, but I think I'll hit too much backlash, and her fans, I think,
I
are.
don't think we're ready for this.
I think they're too feral. I'm not. I'm not. I'm just a nice little English boy. So I will talk about for a little bit. So let's go from Taylor Swift to the tallest man on earth, if that's okay, because
Love it.
he's
Love it.
because that's how I found out
Another
about you.
icon.
an icon. He's an icon for me. But Christian Matson, aka the tallest man on earth. I just want to ask you, how did you meet him? And also, is he as wonderfully and beautifully insane as he seems? Because as a fan, I've followed his work forever, but especially on stage, he seems nuts, and I love it. It's part of why I love him. But
Yeah, I also grew up listening to Christian, and it wasn't like an artist that I obsessed over in the way like maybe I obsessed over like Laura Marling, because obviously that's going to be more relatable to me, and we have like similar range. I can learn all of her songs, whereas like
yeah,
Christian's guitar playing and his vibe, like it was more just an artist that was like in my consciousness growing up as like, oh, it's the tallest man on earth. And so this year last time when my booking agent was like, we're working with tallest man on earth, there might be some dates, would you be interested in opening? I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like any and all dates, I would love to. And a big part of growing at my level is finding those like artists where their fans will come and be a fan of me. And it's like,
yeah. Well,
it's hard to get on a tour that's a great pairing. It really is a hard thing. So I jumped at the opportunity, and then I think our first show was in LA, maybe Hollywood Forever, maybe. But yeah, from the first time I met him, liked him so much. And I think that he's the type of personality that I really get along with. Like, I really like a decisive artist who sort of knows what they want. And he's Swedish. And I do think the Swedes can be kind of straightforward, but like I am too. And like, they're really intense about like time and like being aware of their surroundings and like making sure everyone's included. And it's just like culturally different from Americans, but I really loved the vibe of his whole team and everyone he brought out. And it was very, very cool to be able to tour with him. And we did become friends, and I like him so much. His onstage persona is obviously like a little bit more big and bombastic than his offstage, but he is funny and quirky and all those things, just on a bigger level on the stage.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that he knows what he wants and he's timing and all that stuff, because as you say, the persona that sometimes you get is like this floaty kind of ethereal almost artist, and actually you don't get success by being that way. There has to be with your art at the end of the day.
And I really appreciated, like, he's to the level where he has a big team doing every part of the show for him, but every single decision started with what he wanted for the most part. Like, he's gotten it to the point where he really can be focused on the performance. But I did learn, just from watching, like, all of these team members really know his vision. Like, nobody's just showing up and punching in their time to just get through it. Like, he's really crafted something from start to finish. And I don't know, like, just comparing this to the world of TikTok, like, what a beautiful thing to like truly craft a 90-minute, 100-minute show from start to finish that like means something. It feels so rare now. And it also feels a lot like what Taylor Swift is doing.
We love Taylor on this podcast.
We love her.
We love her. But it's the thing you say, that vision and that what you're doing and what you're building, and it's as you say, it's a slow, methodical process, and it's not as quick as the TikTok thing. But the reason most people who truly love music, like it's truly a part of who they are and it's one of their favorite things, that's why we connect with people like you and people like Christian and people like Bob Dylan and all that, or the bigger the artist, whatever. But yeah, I think how much can you love it if it's just, oh, it's a 30-second soundbite? That's how I'm consuming music. You don't get the full story, really.
Yeah, it's becoming very strange. And part of me is like, oh, maybe all these people that love these like TikTok sound bites will think it's kind of like vintage and cool to go to a show. Like, what a strange concept, like seeing an hour of music live. Like, how, but I don't know. And I've heard stories of these like,
it'd be like the new hipsters. Jesus.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. But I don't know, I've heard stories of like the people who have the one hit wonders like playing shows now, and people only listening for those 30 seconds and then just talking through the rest of the set. And like the people end up playing that same hit like a couple times in the set because it's like the only way people listen. And it just feels so disjointed from what like playing music should be.
Well, this is a really hard question, but what is playing to you? What is playing music? What do you want to translate to an audience with your work?
Yeah, well, I write the songs to exist in their entirety, and I write I put together sets so that they kind of make sense from start to finish. And so, I mean, to me, writing songs is just another form of storytelling. It's just
Hmm.
another way of expressing something. And when we like cut it all up and make it all disjointed, like what is the point of it? Whereas
Mm.
like if the full song is meant to say something, it's sort of like reading a book, but only reading the first four chapters and be like, well, that was great. That was a great book. I can't wait to tell my friends to read those first four
Yeah.
chapters. And it's like, what? And I don't know. Like, I think about some of my favorite songs, like taking a Boots of Spanish Leather and just singing like one verse.
Hmm. Yeah.
How will you ever convey what was meant to be conveyed in
Hmm.
that song? So I think that is how I'd like to play and consume music.
Yeah.
Just like the whole song, crazy idea.
Well, the whole
But I don't know.
album as well. This is what's being lost, I think. People listening to the whole album. And like it's the highlight of my week. I always go for a really long walk
Mm,
one day a week and I listen to a new album that time. And it's as you say, you don't get the full picture. I mean, with a song like Boots of Spanish Leather, how are you going to get the payoff or Don't Think Twice It's All Right? The whole genius of the song is kind of lost without that final payoff,
hmm
I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
Mm.
strange because like these sound bites, I really didn't think I would get so much into TikTok, but here we are. These as I go through sound bites, these TikTok videos, it's more about like conveying a crafted like vibe than it is about they care about the song at all. Like
Mm.
they are just I mean, most of the time now they're just used because like your video will do better if you use a viral sound. Like people selecting these don't know the artist, they don't care.
Mhm.
And even if they do know the artist and care, like it's way more about crafting a short vibe than it is about really music. And
Kind
that's
of like
like
marketing more than music in
yeah,
some
and that's like
sense.
a weird way for musicians to try to make a living now. That's a weird way for musicians to try to have to connect with new audience members because it's like, how do you explain to the masses, like, do you remember that song that was being used in all those like dog videos? That was me. Just so you know, that was me.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
that was me, and you should come to my show and enjoy an hour of different music
yeah,
now.
yeah, and I'm in Indianapolis and Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly.
But it does make you think as well. If you're looking for it, which most musicians are looking for a career of longevity and to be able to do this. I mean, TikTok and these viral marketing campaigns are a trend and they will change. And
Mhm.
when they change, it's like, what do you then have to fall back on if you were crafting your entire image and your marketing strategy and your music around someone going, oh, that's the one that was in, yeah, as you say, the dog video or something.
And I think that's like very similar to what happened with Vine. Like a lot of
Mm,
people had thriving comedy things going on and like, were viral and then it just kind of died.
yeah.
And what do you do when it dies? Like, and that's like why so many music bloggers and podcasters like push artists to like have their mailing list. And it seems like so old and weird, but like if you actually can get to your fans, unless like we have an apocalypse and the grid goes down, like you will still be able to get to these fans
Yeah.
through email. Like even if all of the social medias end, like
Yeah.
you will still have a fan base that you can reach directly. And I don't know. It's all very strange. I think about it all the time, but I don't know if there's like really any obvious solutions or rule book to this. Like I think everything we've even said in this interview
Totally.
um
It's
could be
moving so
completely different
fast,
for
isn't
someone
it?
else. Yeah, like
Yeah.
somebody might have built an entire career on TikTok and people love all their songs and that's amazing.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm looking more at like trends at what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah.
It's all very confusing.
Yeah. You mentioned Bob Dylan. Now, I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan, and I'm guessing you are too, because you've released Boots of Spanish Leather and If You See Us Say Hello. Are those the
Mhm.
two, right?
Yeah.
What's your relationship to his music? Because I mean, both the listeners and everyone in my life will be tired of me talking about Bob Dylan at this point. But it's rare that I actually get to talk to someone who loves him too. Because I have kind of encyclopedic knowledge of Dylan's career.
Yeah.
And I never get to share it. I'm kind of it's kind of the weird oddity in my friend group, isn't it? Dan fucking doing another cover of Bob Dylan.
That's so funny. Um, yeah, so when I was in college, my last year, I was able to kind of do this final project on whatever I wanted to. It was for the music degree. And I decided to do about the 60s folk revival. And I was really into folk music and kind of wanted to like learn everything I could at that time. And so I got a bunch of books and I was reading up on the 60s folk revival. And that's when I really dug into Bob Dylan's music and kind of what he was doing, the time in which he was writing. I read the book that Suze Rotolo wrote, his longtime partner, girlfriend, or whatever. And yeah, I really got in to the time period and kind of like writing folk songs to be sort of protesting things and using it for political ways, but also just like these beautiful sweeping narrative love songs that he's writing as well. And I don't know, like obviously like everyone knows that Bob Dylan's voice is like pretty abrasive and
It's a
um
acquired taste, I say, especially
put it
now. I saw him
put it
last year. And
mildly. And so yeah, and so I think one reason I was so drawn to him was because I knew that if I covered these songs, like it would feel so different. Female voice, like completely different timbre, sort of a thing. And I'm always sort of looking how to cover things with it not feeling like I'm just repeating what already exists. And so that's a big reason I was drawn to him, was because I knew that I could find a lot of these songs that, the lyrics were so rich and deep, and I could kind of bring a new perspective to these
yeah.
cover songs. So that was sort of the basis of why I got really into studying Bob Dylan.
It's so interesting because that's what he is still trying to do. I mean, he rearranges his songs. He's constantly there's now I mean, I'm so sad that I've listened to like decades worth of live recordings of his stuff, and it's like a different song sometimes. He's bringing every different meaning out of it. Is that I was going to say, is there anything within his writing that particularly inspired you? Because one thing I love about Bob Dylan, and it's something I don't think he gets enough credit for, is the way he writes a love song or a heartbreak song. I often find with love songs you can kind of the general theme is either I love you, it's so beautiful, I'm so happy, or it's over, everything's terrible, oh my god. uh, and I find he writes so beautifully somewhere in the middle there. There's a line in If You See Her Say Hello about a relationship it's a song about a relationship that's past, but the line is she might think that I've forgotten her, don't tell her it isn't so. And I love that.
Mm,
It's kind of like, oh, I'm still, it's way past, but I'm still grieving a little bit. Even there's a little flicker in there. And there's a song
mm,
of yours that I think's off your first EP, Pages,
mm.
that I think is such an interesting sort of almost love song. It's like this love that could have happened but didn't quite. I mean, it may not be, but this is me reading into it.
Yeah.
But I love those versions of love songs where it's not black and white. And yeah, Pages is a beautiful song. I really love that
No,
song.
thank you.
Mm.
I haven't thought about that song in so long. I feel like I maybe wrote that like I don't know,
When
8
you were
years ago,
12.
9 years ago. Yeah. um yeah, I mean, I think it's like it's hard to say specifically like, oh, when he wrote this, it made me realize I could write like that. I think it's more sort of like it kind of like seeps in. It's more like sponge like when you study someone's writing and you study the way they play, and then you kind of learn those songs and then you keep writing your own songs. I think it's only um expected that like some of that's going to kind of infuse your own writing. And
Yeah.
so I don't know if I can point to any like specific things that his writing has taught me. I mean, I think in general, just like going back to the decisiveness of artists, I think artists kind of knowing what they want to say
Mm.
and knowing how they're going to say it is such a great thing to learn,
Mm.
because it's really easy to feel like you have nothing to say, but also I think when you're decisive, you can say less and it can be more powerful. And I think great writers do that. When you kind of are like all over the place and you're like writing, messy things and bad metaphors and you're throwing everything at the wall, that's not decisive. That's still figuring out how to write. And I think studying people who know how to write can only make you a way better writer.
Yeah. Are there any of his songs in particular that really resonate with you or you particularly love? Because that often, I think, when I'm asked that question, because I do write songs, I'm too scared to. I'm gonna do it this year. I'm gonna release my first single this year.
Just be decisive.
I know, be decisive. I've literally recorded it about 3 times and had it half mastered, and then gone, no, I'm not ready to do it. Anyway, but it often tells you what parts of that artist's writing has by osmosis rubbed off on you. So, are there any particular of his songs that you really love?
I love Blowing in the Wind so
Mhm.
much. And especially like living in a tense political climate, which I do because I'm American. There's like something so cathartic about like listening to Bob's political songs from that time when like it felt tense to him, and
Mm.
just sort of like the lived American experience of like, this is stressful and like we wish it was different, and yet like the answer is blowing in the wind. Like it's
Yeah.
all so much less final than we think it is. And so I
Mm.
think the songs that sort of are like that are very powerful to me. I love that time period in which he was writing.
Yeah. It's interesting how I often don't think I take into account how much of an American writer he is. I mean, it's even when he was booed in the 60s in the UK. It was like,
Yes.
this British music. It's not British music, it's American music. It's like, yeah, it is. um,
Yeah.
so what you said Laura Marling, but are there any other specific, and specifically, I think for this podcast, it'd be interesting to hear if there are any other British folk musicians that have really made an impact on you.
Totally. So just generally musicians who I've been very impacted by, I'm obsessed with Paul Simon. And this has been like a truly a lifelong obsession. My
Yeah.
parents played his music for me when I was little. And I mean, some of these songs I've been like listening to on a weekly basis for like 25 years. And so like it's an obsession. But other British artists, I really do love the Staves. I've been a big fan of them for a long time. I'm now trying to think. This is not British, but I've been really
It
into
doesn't
Jose
just have to be
Gonzalez.
British. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Oh my god. No. I'm
You
like, I should have
suck.
done my
No.
research.
Well, you've been
No, I
compared to
mean,
Nick Drake by the New York Times. So
yes,
that's,
right.
I've never
There
been
you
compared
go.
to Nick Drake. So
Well, it's because you haven't
by
put out
anyone,
that
let alone
song
the New
yet.
York Times. Yeah, that's true.
You just have to put that song out.
He sounds like a really scared Nick Drake.
Oh my god, that's so funny. Gregory Alan Isaacoff, love his music. Sufjan Stevens, that's another
Oh,
big one.
yeah.
Yeah, and Jose Gonzalez, I've been really into his stuff as of late. Yeah, just there's so many artists that I'm super inspired by. Tom Misch, he's a
So Mish,
Brit.
yeah.
Love
Yeah.
him. When I
Fever
was
to
in
the no,
London
that's not
two
his.
summers ago, every time I travel, I see someone famous. This is a thing. This is a thing. I was in London. I was walking home from the theater, and there he was. And I almost said something, but then I didn't because I was like, no, play it cool.
Well, I
But
I
yeah,
did that with you in the bar of the Bowery. I was like, you were there, and I was like,
you
I want
did
to.
not play it cool. No,
I did.
I'm just
No, yeah.
joking.
I did. I was on my own at that night as well. I was like, everyone was in couples around the thing, and I was just there like, I'm in New York, and no one I know likes Thomas Mann.
That's so funny. What were you doing in New York? Was it to see Christian or was it like a trip?
No, it was a trip. So my great friend of mine, Jana Keel, who's been on the podcast, I know loads of Americans because I went to drama school, and there were loads of Americans at my drama school.
Okay.
And so she had lived in London for like since she left drama school, so about 6 years, and had just moved back to Vermont. So I went to stay with her in Vermont for a while, and then I went to see some friends in New York, in Brooklyn. And I basically, because of that trip, I was supposed to be seeing Christian in London, and I was like, I'm not going to make it back in time, and I'm going to be super jet lagged. And I was like, oh, wonder where is he playing in America? And he was in New York when I was, so that was kind of cool.
That's
But yeah,
crazy.
but yeah,
So did you go
I really wanted to come up
to
to
sorry.
you and be like, You were fantastic. You're amazing, but you were busy talking to someone, so I
We're
didn't.
doing it now.
We're
We're
doing it
doing it
now. I've
now.
made up for it.
And so much better, right? So was your drama school in the UK or was it in
It was in the
America?
UK, so I went to LAMDA, which is the London Academy
Okay.
of Music and Dramatic Art. But there's a lot of Americans come over, but people from all around the world. But I think a lot of Americans. I think there's a weird thing sometimes with American actors, and I think it's starting to go out of fashion. But there's this thing of, I think if you want to do stage work, you come to the UK and you train here. There's that sort of thing, which is rubbish because like places like Yale and Juilliard are phenomenal too and create phenomenal stage actors. But I often find that when I'm in America, it's the one place I don't have social anxiety because there's a weird like you're immediately interesting as soon as you open your mouth because you sound different. But with
Mhm.
American actors, there's this weird kind of reverence of not of me, but of British actors in general.
You are England to
I
us.
am merry old England. There we are. But yeah, so it's yeah, I've had a it's a very interesting connection I have with America and American culture because so much of my artistic loves are um American, including like it's through Bob Dylan really, but I then fell in love with like the Beat generation of poets and Kerouac and all that stuff, and then Hemingway. But I think I connect to Americans on some sort of deep level. Like my first love was American, and I think there's something about they can meet me, the emotionally intelligent ones anyway. There's non-emotionally intelligent everyone across the planet, but the emotionally intelligent ones can meet me at a place where often British people, our culture doesn't allow us because there's this sort of wall of separation with British culture where you kind of you don't fully express your feelings. You don't say you don't want to burden anyone with it. Whereas actually I could feel like I could um yeah, just be vulnerable more comfortably around Americans, which I think has led to a great friendship with a couple of people and yeah, a relationship of days gone by. Wow.
That's interesting. That really touches on the plot of The Buccaneers, which is a terrible show about
Oh, good.
it's like Gilded Age meets Gossip Girl. I
Oh,
just watched it this weekend and it's all about these British people hating Americans because we're so dramatic. So I really understand what you're
interesting.
saying. No, the show is so much more, but it's like it's not the worst show ever, but it's like pretty hilarious. The
Yeah.
the themes are like really intense and I
Yeah.
they're like trying to show the differences so starkly. Like all these
Mm.
British people are like so
So straight laced.
repressed and
Yeah.
these Americans are like just like running around drinking and like falling over and yelling and it's pretty
Yeah.
hilarious. But
Sounds
that's
phenomenal.
interesting you say that. Do you feel like the like emotionally kind of like a wall is up? Do you find that like even in the artistic communities as well, or is it a bit different there?
I think it's a bit different there. And I also think it's starting to change with my generation and the generations below. But my parents' generation and stuff, it's kind of this thing of you don't burden people with your problems. And it's always that, you know, that cliche, stiff upper lip and just pretend everything's kind of fine. In
Yeah.
artistic circles, no, I mean the deep friendships I have are all incredibly vulnerable and we talk about this stuff. But I do find one of my most uncomfortable places to be in life is at a party with loads of actors because you weirdly these people who to be a good actor it's about vulnerability and yet there's kind of this front on of well you ask someone how are you and they're like I'm great I just taped for this role and I've just done this it's like no how are you it's just it just feels kind of
Right. I'm
weird
like
and
not
fake.
asking like what did you recently accomplish? Like I'm
Yeah,
asking
I'm
how
asking you
are
how are
you?
you yeah totally.
Yeah.
Have you ever toured? I could be the goodwill ambassador to you know. Anyway, um, I don't normally ask songwriters this. I never ask, and I'm not going to ask you. I don't ask like what's a song about, but I kind of I'm interested in. I have listened to other songs of yours, by the way. I've listened to lots of songs, but I love
Only the
Portland.
Bob Dylan covers and then that
The
song
Bob
from 10
Dylan
years
and
ago.
Pages, Portland, and the Bob Dylan. um, but a song like Portland, where did the inspiration for that come? And also, I'm always interested with songwriters. How long did that song take to write? Because I find that the songs I've written that are good, are the ones that come out really quickly. If I have to think about it I can go back and edit, but if I have to think about it too long, it usually sucks. So how long did a song like that take to write?
Took 3 years. No, I'm just joking. It,
A
it took
whole
very
life,
little
baby.
time. No, so that song I wrote, I kind of started thinking about the idea of that song when I was maybe end of college and doing that trip to the Pacific Northwest for the first time, but I didn't write anything down. It was just like a lived experience. And like when you grow up in Nebraska, you're kind of the butt of every joke. I don't know what the equivalency like would be for you, but
Where I'm
like you
from, the West Country, it's like
okay, perfect.
farmers and pirates, basically.
Yeah, and we don't even have pirates. Like it's
Yeah.
just farmers and cows. So this idea of like Portland had been kind of wedged in my mind as like a cool place. And when you spend so much of your time not living in an artistic hub, not living in a cool place, you before I started like really touring, but just like going to school away and saying I'm from Nebraska and being made fun of. And people always saying, like, oh, well, you're from there, but you don't live there anymore. Right. And you
Right.
get that all the time. And so this idea of Portland was sort of like, this is a place where I'm going to fit in better. This is a place that's going to be cool. Like, this is a place that's going to make me feel validated. And these are like the thoughts of like a senior in college. Okay. Like,
Yeah.
this is not how I feel now, but that's how I felt then. And so that song was written kind of based on that. And it's interesting because someone told me that the song kind of reminded them of like a spiritual response to Graceland by Paul Simon, which I did not think
Wow.
about at the time. And that's a really nice comment. Like I'm gonna
Yeah. I
put that
mean,
on the bio.
one of the
Someone
greatest
once
songs of all
said
time.
a stranger once told me. But no, so I think though, like kind of Graceland, this idea of like we're gonna find a place where we belong, we're gonna find a place where they accept everyone. That is kind of like I'm personally going to find a place that works for me better. And I've now grown up and I realize like I don't know if a place really can do that for you. Like I truly do sort of think wherever you go, like there you are.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm kind of learning as I get older. But at that point, Portland was very much this North Star of
Mm.
existence for me. And so that's kind of how the song was written. And I mean, it truly was written in about 5 minutes.
Lyrics first,
No,
and
I
then
think I
guitar.
had the guitar chords and I was sort of just humming. And then
Mm.
it really did just flow out really freely.
Yeah, yeah. It's often the way with the good ones, I find. As
I do too.
because I've written loads of fantastic songs. But
Oh, no, I
um,
do think there is like an effortlessness to it. And I
yeah.
think it comes from a lot of work that you might not see, like
Mm.
learning new guitar chords, learning a strumming pattern, taking that trip, like becoming like aware that something's brewing. And then when you sit down to write, then it can be
Yeah.
very fast.
There was a cool thing I won't get the quote right, but it was something Neil Young said where he was basically like, I've made a deal with all the people I love that if that creative spark comes for a song, whatever I'm doing, I have to drop it. He said, because I don't ever try and force it. I don't ever try and sit down and write.
Mm.
And it's like a gift from whatever the heavens. And when it comes, you've got to respect it, kind of thing.
That's so beautiful. I would love to live like that.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever can take that sort of like I'm so much more of a control freak to like wait for inspiration. Like I'm just gonna sit down and gut it out. But I
Yeah.
think that's a really beautiful way to live.
I think it's one of the reasons I love writing short form. So short form things like poetry and songwriting is because I mean I'm not doing it for a living, so it's not as pressing that I have to get an album out. But I love the fact that I don't have to think of it the same way I think about writing screenplays or short stories or anything. It kind of it comes or it doesn't, and
Mm.
the good ones come very quickly, and then you can go back and edit. But that to me is I find such a freedom in that. It's like, oh, I've been given this little gift, and I can get out of my own head and my own way for half an hour, 45 minutes.
Totally. And I think like having voice memos and stuff now is so crucial because
Yeah.
really you can be anywhere and you can, jump on and be like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. This is the melody. And then kind of come back to it later, which is so helpful.
Can I ask you? I don't know if this is just me, but I have so many random voice notes on my phone that are just me having thought of a melody with no lyrics yet, and I'm just like, Just trying to get the vague
And there's this like
outline of
awful
what
like
this...
crunching sound in the
Yeah,
back, or like
yeah.
it's like you listen back, you're like, oh my god, that's so
Jesus.
painful.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I've got hundreds of those.
There's a beautiful line in that song that I am fangirling now, but hey,
Let's go for it.
what better time to do it? Um, nobody cares if the foundation's cracked as long as it looks good when somebody asks, and I've got a man who loves me despite what I lack. I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful couplet, and
Thank you.
well done you for writing it.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
That's all right. My friend Jack said not to mention it on the podcast. Tell her before, but I played him that song, and now he's obsessed with you too. So you've got two fans in one from
Oh
that.
my
From that show.
gosh, you guys, thank you.
Come
This
to
is how
the
it starts.
UK. Play
I
over
would like
here.
to.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's been kind of overdue. I've been wanting to forever. And then, obviously 2020 was a strange year. And hopefully, maybe the end of this year, I'll be popping over.
Yeah. There's so many cool places everywhere, but London specifically for singer-songwriters. Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Lydia Luce was just over there with her Lachlan Strings project that she does. She had a where could this show have been? I can't remember. It was like a pretty iconic room with like some pretty iconic British singer-songwriters who were singing their stuff with her like string ensemble. This was like a couple weeks ago. Did you hear about this? I'll send you the specs later.
Yeah,
But
please do.
seems like it was an amazing night, and me
Yeah.
and Lydia are kind of hoping to get over there and maybe do some touring together in the fall.
So
we'll see.
There's a beautiful place in North London that I think it was the third time I'd seen Christian play. Christian, tallest man on earth. I don't know him.
Chris.
Chris, just reach out, come do the podcast. But there's a place called Union Chapel that's like this converted, beautiful old church.
Okay, I think that's where they played.
It's the acoustics are incredible, and I imagine something like that with strings would be the
okay. Yeah,
place.
it was the Union Chapel with Matilda Mann, Eloise, another person, and Lydia.
There we are. It's a stunning venue. It's beautiful. The acoustics.
It looks amazing. Yeah, that's really so cool. Lovely. And that's where you saw Christian.
That's one of the places. I've seen him many places,
man. But yes.
All over the world now. It's getting a little. I've seen wherever I've seen him. I've seen him. So the UK a few times, America now, the Netherlands. I was on tour doing a play, and I was like, he's in the Netherlands, and I'm in the Netherlands, so I'm going to go see it. But yeah, I was going to ask you, as an actor, I'm a huge Shakespeare nerd, and you have many songs that you have Desdemona, you have a whole EP that's based on Romeo and Juliet that is stunning, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me about this.
I'm also a big Shakespeare nerd. My mom is an English teacher. She taught Macbeth. So that was kind of my first time really understanding a Shakespeare play. But yeah, so the Romeo and Juliet thing, I was asked to write a 5-song EP to accompany their production of it. So like those songs played during the production. Yeah. And that was difficult because like they're going to be speaking dialogue, and this is like it was a lot. It was like it was sort of a tall order, but I think it worked. And then yeah, I love live theater. I love television. I love that art form. Like I think artists kind of love the cross contamination because like it's not as stressful, it's more enjoyable. And so like you're not like constantly comparing yourself like, why didn't I get that role, like you can actually just enjoy it, whereas like I can barely go to shows. Like it's so hard to go to live music shows.
Same for me. Going to see theater
exactly, whereas like going to a show for the theater is so cathartic.
I find I have this, and I'm trying to get over it because I love theatre and I have to tap into why I love it and all that. But I find, and I'm sure it's a similar thing for you going to concerts, that I know 100 of my friends who are phenomenally talented and aren't up there on that stage, and someone's been picked other than them. And I get that anger and that bitterness is still there. I've worked on it, but still comes to the surface sometimes.
It's difficult, and it's difficult because you can't really just enjoy it for what it is when you work in the industry, because like you'll go to a show and you'll be like, I wonder how many tickets have sold. Should I start counting like how many people did this person bring out? And then you're like, I wonder if they're enjoying the green room tonight. I wonder what the house catered in for them
Yeah, I
tonight. And
wonder
then
what
and
the
then you're like,
rider is.
I'm gonna go check the merch and just see like how it's going. And then you're like, okay, this
Yeah,
is so ridiculous.
you're
Like you're
kind of
not
at work.
working this show.
Yeah,
Like you're not working tonight.
yeah.
Whereas like I'm sure it's the same for theater. Like you
Mm,
you can like it can't just be like getting lost in the show. I
yeah.
think you have to be like really in a good headspace to just be able to be lost in the same art form that you do.
I
But
think
yeah, I would just say like I've always been super inspired by Shakespeare. Love his writing. I love to retell the stories kind of like in a modern song form. Also
mm,
just like the words are so beautiful, the words he uses, the character names, the way that he writes can be like kind of stolen a little bit and used in
mm.
song form, and I learned that a
Mumford
lot
and
with the
Sons have made a
romantic.
career from it.
Exactly. For better or worse. And I used
Oh
uh
God, we've got the Mumford and Sons fans coming after me now. Jesus, what are you doing, Andrea?
I like so many of their songs, but I
Yeah,
I
me
do
too.
feel like they've kind of like that time period's become kind of charactery,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I had a because I was what I was like 14 when their stuff started coming out, and songs like Winter Winds. I love songs like that. But yeah, it just feels a little bit like a little bit. Oh God, I'm gonna get in so much trouble. A little bit, a little bit Lumineersy, a little bit like this is a folk scene. This is
Oh,
this
absolutely.
is the old style. Ha.
Like
Don't
the
know.
four on the floor kind of like stompy clappy kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is weird because a lot of Noah Kahan's songs on SNL kind of had a Mumford texture to them. Did you hear that performance?
I did. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was like,
I
wow,
can
this is
totally
kind of
see that.
reminding me of this like time period from a while ago. But anyways, so yeah, I love that, and I really do think like writing well, it's good to take from so many different
Mm,
places. Like the amount of times I'll like read poetry and think, what can I steal? What can I steal?
yeah,
What stories can I use? How can I retell this? And so I think like Shakespeare's has been a big part of that.
fantastic. Yeah, it's my sort of. I think my forte as an actor is Shakespeare, and it's the thing I all the roles that well not all of them, but the main ones I like. I have to play that role before I die. They're all like the Shakespeare ones.
And do you have any insight into like who he really was?
Well, my thoughts
Like what
about
are
the
your thoughts on this? Because
yeah.
my brother's a real conspiracy theorist, and he once made me watch a video from about 33 years ago on a grainy YouTube channel
Hmm.
about who he really was. And I can't say I was like all that interested, but I just, as a British person, I just wonder if you have any like insight for that for me.
As a British
Like, do you have any like
person.
secrets you could share?
Yeah, no. So my thoughts on it, the yeah, the whole Shakespeare authorship thing. I think I've got as an actor, you can tell for me, he was probably an actor. I mean, he's even got the Hamlet
Hmm.
speech where he's basically talking like a director, where he goes, "Speak the speech, I pray you, trippingly on the tongue." But if you know, he goes on to this amazing speech about how to act, basically. So I think
Hmm.
I want to believe it was the real William Shakespeare. But the thing for me is, whoever it was, they were an unbelievable genius who managed to somehow there's there's not many areas of the human condition that Shakespeare didn't have an understanding of. I mean, I
Hmm.
remember there was a an article. I can't remember which newspaper it was in. But when the Me Too movement started really hitting international headlines and stuff, there was a an article that quoted a thing from Measure for Measure, and it was basically like I'll get it wrong, but it's like, who will believe me? It's this woman who's being mistreated by a man in a position of power, and he says no one's going to believe you because of my prestige. Because it's like all these things, you can find anything in the modern world that goes back to it. So for me, I think it was William Shakespeare. I think he was an actor, and with his biography, he was an actor manager. So I think it was him. But um, if not, thanks for the work. You know, it's like it's it's like it's like Bob Dylan. Like I don't particularly want to meet Bob Dylan. One because I'd be even more nervous than I am now and blabbery and
Hmm.
all that. But also it colors that it's not, it's why I'd never ask songwriters specifically what their songs are about, because I sort of don't want to know on some level, because a song like Most of the Time by Bob Dylan, I don't know if you know that song, it's from Oh Mercy,
Hmm.
and it's a similar one of that kind of you know, the relationship broke down ages ago, and he's kind of saying, I don't even think about her, I don't remember what her kiss felt like, and the end of every verse is most of the time, so you kind of don't believe him. And for me, I don't want to know about the specific relationship that he had, that song was based on, because it had such implications for a breakup I had, and it's like it's always planted in that time for me, and I think that's the beautiful thing about music. I've gone way off topic, but yeah, the work more than the person. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's the
No,
work that matters
I
to me.
completely understand,
Yeah.
and I agree. I don't spend that much time wondering who Shakespeare was, but I am a little curious.
I think there's a certain snobbery about the thought that Shakespeare wasn't who he was as well, because it's basically saying, oh, a person from kind of a modest background couldn't have written this and couldn't have had this knowledge. Well,
That's
actually,
exactly what my mom said when she was upset with my brother for saying he was the Earl of
yeah.
whatever.
Well, I mean, for one, when it comes to plays like The Winter's Tale, he makes massive mistakes when it comes to geography, history, and regions and all that. So he's not that, he doesn't get everything
Right.
right.
He's not that well traveled.
No, but most people, he went to a grammar school, and I imagine a grammar school at that time, they would have taught the classics, they'd have taught Greek myth, and that's what his plays go back to. It goes back to myths, and it goes back to archetypes
Hmm.
and all that stuff. So I'm a believer.
Me too. Did you read Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell?
I did. There's a production
Incredible.
of it at the the Royal Shakespeare Company at the moment that I'd love to
Really?
see. Yeah,
Oh, I
they've
would
done
love
it
to
as
see that.
they've
That
done it as
book
a
was
stage play.
great.
Beautiful. She's fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's amazing.
So
Amazing.
Shakespeare was an actor, and it turns out, Andrea von Kampen, that you are also an actor.
I was
Um,
worried we'd get to this.
well, you
But what
mentioned.
a great lead in.
I know, right? I'm getting good at this whole podcast shit. But I bring it up because you mentioned it in the when I saw you in the show. You mentioned it, and how was your experience of acting? I mean, because what is it? It's, you turn up, you say some stuff, you go home. It's simple.
You know how like you don't want to put that song out yet? That's kind of how I feel about the whole acting
Yeah, yeah.
sphere of my life. So, I acted in high school and college. I did like theater productions. I've always liked telling stories in different mediums. And so my friend was working on his first full-length film, and it is about a singer-songwriter.
Mm.
And so I knew that like that part of it I wouldn't be out of my depth. I wrote the music for this film. I felt good about all of that. The acting part was like terrifying because I had never done it before, and eventually it sort of became fun. Like it was kind of an addictive thing. Like I loved having to take like so many different takes. I loved sort of like the immediate gratification of like, great, let's do it again, let's do it again. There's like a fun, it's so different from making music and being with a group of people for a month. Like I'm such an extrovert. I love just being around so many people every day, and I loved the process. I would totally do it again. I don't think I'd ever want to be the lead again. Like I would love to just be a part of the world again.
They threw you in at the deep end for your first role,
They
leading a
really
film.
did. They really, really did. And I mean, I don't think any of us thought it would, it's like so weird. I barely understand the film world at all, but I don't think any of us thought it would like have a reach it did. And even though it's not like this crazy well-known film, like I'm seeing it promoted on Amazon like every day to me, and
Yeah.
I quickly move away from it so that it stops showing it to me, and it's not stopping. And it's on all these airlines and has been for like over a year now. And so, and even just like the press of films is so different than the press of music. It's like you try so hard to just get some sort of publication right about your album, and
Mm.
then you do this random film and you get a New York Times review, and it's like, that's so weird. Like I've been trying so hard to get into this publication, but then I do this like random indie film that very few people know, and the press gets on board even if it's not good press. People are still
Yeah.
writing about it. Like the two worlds are so different. And so, I mean, I learned a ton. It was a great experience in terms of like getting out of my comfort zone. Um I don't know if I would ever like do it again in that capacity, with that big of a role, but it was a really good experience.
Yeah. I thought it was so interesting. It must be a, I think you're probably one of the only people. Well, no, I'm sure there's more, but like it's very not very often that you get to be the lead in a film and you're also scoring the film. You know, like John Williams never got to star in his films.
No,
You
and
know,
we want to see him.
you are better than John Williams. That's news
Thank
off
you.
the. But yeah, it's did you have that in mind as an act when you were acting, kind of like, oh, this is the piece of music that's going to be under this, or was that all done in post and you decided kind of then?
Yeah, I wrote the score to the dialogue. So
Mhm.
I had the whole script and then I wrote the whole thing. So every song was meant to be where it was.
That's so interesting. As an actor, that's so interesting to know the feeling tone of what the sound's going to be like while you're shooting it. That's really cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
I
Yeah.
think a trained actor would think about that. I don't know if I was thinking about that at all.
I thought you were very, very natural on camera, and it's not
Thank
easy
you.
to do. You would think like that's the thing. Really, acting, everyone should be able to do it because it's just being normal, slightly in heightened circumstances. But it's not easy to not look uncomfortable and not look out of depth on camera, and you very much didn't. So
Thank you. What was your first role that was on like camera?
my first role that was on camera was, oh, it was a series on Channel 4 called Jutland, and I was playing a military. I think I was just a private. This was years ago, but yeah, I was coming off the. I was in the sea at Dunkirk and heavily wounded, and it was
Oh,
very.
wow.
It was a weird one because it was very action. It was very, like high stakes. So I didn't get to. It's very different when like the film you were in, where there's a lot of just dialogue with another person straight there. But it was good fun. I mean, I love working on camera. I covered it a lot in training and thought I'd hate it and absolutely loved it. I just haven't had that much of a chance to do it, and I'm kind of trying to manifest it into existence. But
Yeah.
the acting industry is a kick in the balls because you do feel like so much of it is out of your control. Whereas I suppose at least with music you have an element of control because it's your songs, and it's but it's a difficult one.
I can't imagine like being a player in a bigger operation and having to just try to like get auditions and slip in and make it work. I one thing I always, I'm such a control freak. One thing I'm always so grateful for is that like with my career, like it starts with me. I'm generating the ideas, I'm creating them, I'm making them into existence. And even if it goes terribly, like it was all my fault anyways, where it's like when
Yeah.
you don't get that role, or you don't get to be a part of that production, it's like, what did I do wrong? Like, and the whole thing carries on without me. And it's like,
Yeah.
I
I
was watching Les Mis the other weekend with my mom. We went to see Les Mis and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so jealous. Like, I don't even want to be here. I was like, why can't I do this? And it's like, I can't sing these roles. Like, I'd have to train for like a year to be able to sing this role. And for some reason, I'm like getting jealous. I'm like, oh, why? And then I thought, like, whoa. Like, you have a way to make art. Like, you don't like work a 9 to 5 where you have no
Mm.
connection to art. Like, you are an artist and like be grateful. Like, you can create what you want to create and you're not at the mercy of all these other things having to come together anytime you want to create art. So
Yeah.
I do feel like that would be really difficult.
It is tough, and sort of the ways I've dealt with it. I didn't deal with it very well when I'd first left drama school, but I'm coming up to like 7 years out of drama school now. And I think one thing is I have a weird level of inner self-belief, not in an arrogant way, just about I know I'm good at what I do and I know I'm passionate
Mhm.
about it and I know I work hard and I know what my strengths are with it. So, and then you get the knowledge of looking behind the curtain of what the industry is like and you realize how random and how you see it's so heartbreaking how many stunningly talented actors have that I've known since leaving drama school are not doing it anymore because it was just like this is making me miserable and I'm getting nowhere and no one's so I don't take it as personal criticism when I don't get the role because usually it's not about that. um but also just other stuff. I mean, it's one of the it's this is partly an excuse, but it is one reason I haven't released music yet is because there's an element where I started playing music again a couple of years out of drama school because I was so depleted by the acting industry and feeling like I had no voice, and it was all out of my control. And I was like, I'm going to go and start playing live again. And I did. And it was like this, oh, it was such a beautiful outlet. And part of the thing that was nice about it was that it was just for the joy of it. It wasn't for
Yeah.
anything else.
It hasn't been tainted yet by having to make it a career.
Exactly. And so I'm a bit scared of like, I'm also scared of the criticism. I have that self-belief as an actor,
Yeah.
but I don't as a musician. I do as a lyricist, to be fair, and that's something I'd
Mhm.
like to do more. I think I've kind of come to the end of my of the road with kind of um arranging accompaniments and stuff, but lyrics I can do.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is tough. It is tough. Um, so don't do acting again because it sucks.
No, I mean,
Is the
there
message?
is an
No, it
element
doesn't.
of like walking blind when you do like the secondary artistic thing. Like you kind of understand it because like you sort of get the world
Mhm.
more than if you just, didn't do any sort of artistic expression for your living.
Yeah.
But it is so different. You feel very out of your depth. And I think that we use things that don't really matter, like, well, I went to school for this to prove that you're valid, you're valid in
Yes.
this area. And when you don't have those pretend like ego boosters, you really feel like you're walking blindly into something. But
Yeah. I love being
you
in
just
the
got to do it
room
though.
with super talented musicians because I have a language with them because I love music and I can talk about all these stuff like the conversations we've had. I also play a little bit and I know, all that stuff. But there's not the pressure to be the best in the room, which I kind of put on myself when I'm an actor.
Totally.
So there's a nice thing about it. I want to talk about your new album, Sister
Mhm.
Moon. Do you have a release date yet, or are you not sure?
Yeah, March 15th.
March 15th. So this will be out just over 2 weeks before then. So
Incredible. Great
incredible
timing.
timing, right? Talk to me about the album. What can we expect from it? Is it following a specific theme? Because I mean, again, this is me reading into it, but it's like little chapters, your albums. I can see an overriding theme, even though the songs aren't all about the same thing. It's like with as you said about Portland, that's such a young person. Oh, well, if I get to that place, I'll be fixed. That's such a rite of
Mhm.
passage for the young and stuff. So yeah, tell me about the new
Yeah.
album.
Yeah, so the new album conceptually came to be when I finished reading Richard Powers' book Overstory, which is a like beautiful, sweeping fictional tale of all these different characters and sort of how their lives relate to trees and how vital trees are to our existence, and also just sort of like how much things are changing rapidly with climate change, deforestation, especially within North America. And he has a great way of making you care about these characters, but also this overarching theme of climate change and deforestation. You start to care even more because you care about how the people relate to how this is going to affect their lives.
Mm,
And I had never read a book like that. I read all the time. I try to read book a week. I'm constantly taking in stories. But this was different. And this really struck me in a way where I was like, I want to write an album that feels like this book. And so I kind of started to parcel through my ideas, and then it kind of grew into something else. And as I was reading this book, I was also really getting into like the alternative orthodoxy of St. Francis of Assisi. So I was raised in a very specific Christian way of thinking. And as I've gotten older, I've kind of stopped thinking that way. And and part of like something that was very cathartic to me was kind of finding my place within this tradition through St. Francis of Assisi and kind of his love of nature and the earth. And when you've been raised a certain way and you have this foundation, and then you read a book like Overstory that kind of challenges everything you've ever learned, you can feel very lost. You can feel very like, what's it all for? What does it all mean? It's sort of like when you're raised being told like evolution doesn't exist, and then like you hear about someone who's 30,000 years old and you're like, okay, I don't understand. Like that wasn't me specifically, but that's kind of what I'm like
yeah.
trying to explain here. So what was so beautiful about reading Overstory at this time was also getting into this alternative orthodoxy of St. Francis of Assisi and sort of seeing how these two worlds complement each other, and how like within the Western Christian tradition, it's very few and far between, but there were people, you know, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, speaking towards like, we need to be better about the earth. We need to be better about climate change. Like, we exist together. This is more connected than you'll ever realize. And there was like so many beautiful like mystics speaking to this, but most of Western Christianity completely ignored all of this.
Exactly. Tried to shut the
And
mystics
did the
down.
opposite.
Yeah.
Did the opposite, like pillaged and destroyed and took and colonized and did really disgusting, horrible things to humanity. And so as I was reading this overstory, I sort of like also had this thought in my head, and those like two overarching thoughts sort of went to create this album. And that was kind of the beginning of writing. And so the album has so many references to trees and humanity and, you know, where are we headed, and like personal songs of I'm, you know, I'm scared. Personally, I'm scared. I don't know where we're going to go from here. And more looking from a bird's eye view, telling it through other characters, using characters from the overstory in some of the songs. One of the songs is just a meditation of St. Francis that's been translated from Italian to English. And it's just kind of like using 6 lines over and over and over again to feel really meditative. So
which
that
one
was
is it? Because
kind of it.
I do know one of the, I know the one that's
That
like
one's
where
not
there is
out yet, but I'll send it over to you.
no, I mean the meditation, the Francis of Assisi meditation, because I
Yeah,
know
so
there's
it's
a
called
beautiful one.
Such Love Does.
I'll have to look that up because I
Yeah,
know
I'll
the one
send it
like
to you though, because
where there
it's
is darkness,
not.
there is light, all that. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay,
the one
yeah,
I
yeah.
know. But yeah,
Right.
Mm.
That is that's the prayer of St. Francis, right?
Yeah, the prayer. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's beautiful too. But
Mm.
yeah, so it's just like a really interesting, like introspective time for me as I kind of like grappled with a lot of the thoughts of like how I was raised and kind of like unraveling those and sort of charting my own course into like, what do I believe spiritually? Like what is the spiritual world? Like, where are we headed? And it's been, yeah, it was a really good journey.
Yeah, that's a big album thematically. Like that's
Yeah.
it. Because I think we're similar. Are you 29? I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
29 too. So we're similar ages, and it is something I think we're one of the first generations who have to think about whether bringing children into the world is a moral it's a moral decision, because you just there's we don't know what's going to happen, and I'm terrified, and I'd love to be a dad, but I sort of don't think I want to bring a kid into a world I don't know what's going to happen.
I
Yeah.
totally understand. It's
Mm.
it's really scary, and like I think we are seeing already just how different the climate is. Like, I don't know if you're feeling that. I was actually in the UK during that like once in every 500-year heat wave, and it was like absolutely awful.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we are seeing the effects already, and it's
Yeah.
just like, man,
It's
what are like
noticeable.
what are we gonna leave to the next generation, and like how are they gonna be able to survive? It's
Mm.
really scary.
Yeah. Are you pleased with the results? I always
Mhm.
am interested to hear musicians like what's it like when you finally have the full mastered version of the album and you sit down and listen to it for the first time. Um, what was
I
that
have a really
experience
hard
like?
time like ever being fully pleased.
Yeah.
I even when it's done, I'm still like, oh, and so it's really hard for me to be like, I love it. It's great. It's my best work ever. Like for me, I'm more like, I think I think we did what we set out to do. I think we
Mm.
captured these thoughts. I think the songs sound good and I'm proud of this, but I don't think like the work is ever done, and I don't think I'll ever feel like that was perfect, which
Mm.
I do think is a good thing, because I think if it's perfect, I'll stop working.
Yeah.
Like, so I
Yeah.
feel proud of this record, and it came out. So writing it was a very different time period in my life than recording it. So recording it was a very contentious, stressful time in my life where a lot of moving parts within my team professionally had changed quickly in ways I wasn't expecting. And so I ended up having to get this done in a completely different way than I thought I was going to.
Right.
So it was a incredibly stressful time in my life. And so it's a little hard to not listen to these and think about
The
how
time period.
stressful it was. But
Yeah.
I do think that the songs will eventually transcend that, and I'll be able to listen to it for what they are. But
Yeah.
currently, not as much.
Are you releasing this one independently, or
Mhm.
yeah, because that was something I meant to ask you earlier. Because you started releasing independently and then you were with a label. Um, I suppose because I don't know what it's like and how limiting or helpful being with a label is now for musicians. I don't know, so I'm interested in your experience with that.
Yeah. Um, so I had gotten to a point independently where I felt like I didn't know how to grow myself from there anymore.
Mm,
This was after Old Country. My streaming was pretty high. Like I was touring as much as I could, but I didn't really have a team. And so in that time, it was 2020 early on, and I sort of got the manager, got the booking agent, got the label, and decided like I'm going to try this now. And I think everyone can have a different outcome on a label, but the more and more I talk to artists who have been on labels, the outcomes seem pretty similar.
mm,
And I definitely experienced that similar outcome as well. And I think a metaphor that I've been like ruminating on quite a bit the last couple of months has been when you first talk to a label, and maybe this is different for other people, but for me, it seemed like we can do this, we can do that, we can do anything, we can do everything. Like, give us your music, we're going to do this and that and that. And then, like, as time moves on, it seems like the label sort of says, oh, everything that we could do was just what you could do. Like,
mm.
everything that you needed, you had all along. It's like a weird, twisted Wizard of Oz retelling for every artist. It's like, pull back the curtain, no one's there. And no
Wow.
one was ever there. And so that's kind of how it felt for me. Like it was a very I mean, I'm really glad I tried releasing an album in that way. I think it was like really good to see like what was what is the music industry, what can they do, like when I'm not independent, what gets done, like what can get done better than I can do. And it turned out that like I really preferred an independent release. I like having the artistic control, and I find that when there's so many players involved, like the artistic vision gets incredibly diluted, and
Yeah.
then what you're putting out might not even have been what you set out to make. And the music world is so democratized with streaming now that artists do have more of a voice than we used to. And we don't need the gatekeepers in the same way we did. And there's nothing wrong with trying it out. But I'm finding like more and more artists are saying, like, yeah, I think when I did this with a smaller team, when I did this with a distribution company instead of a full fledged label, the outcomes were similar, but like I felt like I could be more of who I wanted to be. So I
Mm.
think a good label kind of amplifies what you're already doing. And I think a lot of labels sort of just want to use this old archaic model with the artist and make them fit into that model, but that model doesn't work anymore. And I think artists and labels end up feeling like pretty tense about that relationship.
Yeah. I'll This reminded me of an interview I saw with Frank Zappa before he died. I'll say this and then we'll get to the recurring questions. I promise.
For sure.
But he was saying that, back in the 60s, the record labels were run by older people with, cigars who didn't know anything about music. So they would go, hey, let's give it a try and see if it works. If it does. And that's why, bands like, well, anyone, but a band I love, like Thin Lizzy, had a 3 album deal, and their first 3 albums were fucking weird. And then they had a hit with the fourth. Um, and he said now it's the next generation, the sons of those people who think they know what's cool, and it means that musicians have lost power because they won't give anything a chance. So I'm glad to hear that there is this democratization coming in with the music industry, and that it's almost commonplace to be releasing independently now.
And I think there's scrappier labels and companies that can kind of bridge the gap between the old traditional model and what people are doing now. And so like, there are companies that operate more like a distribution model where they're taking less cuts and they're providing some label services, but they can just move so much more deftly and adapt in this
Mm,
industry. Whereas these old label models are so slow that it just is not meeting the modern demands. And so
yeah.
I'm glad that like we have these like kind of companies that are being able to bridge the gap. But I think in general, labels can still be just incredibly exploitative of artists, and
Yeah.
that is a problem. And I don't know how we solve it, because I think it's a problem as old as humanity, which is like the people that control the money are always going to exploit the artist. I mean, this is why
Yeah.
the old idea of like the jester in the king's court exists.
Yeah.
Like
I
that's
mean,
just how being an artist is for most people.
yeah. I mean, my industry is awful for it. Just, I mean, the amount of emails I've sent out to people, and you just expect never to get a response from anyone, because there has to be, they've designed it. I suppose loads of people want to be a musician, but not loads of people have enough talent to be a musician. Whereas loads of people want to be actors, but the fact that they don't have talent often doesn't get in the way of them pursuing it, kind of thing. So the industry's been designed where there is this real, especially more so in America than in the UK, um, but where these gatekeepers, I mean, you can't even write um, unsolicited to an agent in America, really,
Hmm.
as a saying, this is me, looking for representation, where you can do that in the UK.
Hmm.
So yeah, we now get to the recurring questions that I ask every guest that I sent you last week, Andrea von Kampen.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
would like to know your art of the week, a piece of art from the last week that has moved you, or you've loved, or
Yeah.
whatever.
So Aoife O'Donovan put out a song in the last couple of weeks called All My Friends. I don't know what it's about yet. Like I don't know what this album is going to be about, because this is I think maybe the first single from what's going to be an album, but this single alone is so good. This song is so good. She has a girls choir singing with her. A couple of other groups I think are on this song, and it's a great song. You should totally check it out. It's called All My Friends by Aoife O'Donovan.
I absolutely will. And we have my new website is actually in refurbishment, but we will have a page when it's back up and running where all the art of the week and all the artist spotlight will be listed. So you guys can go and check out how to find these artists. Um, my art of the week is actually, I actually have you to thank, because I think you posted about this album last year at some point, and I've been obsessed with it ever since. At the Roadhouse by the Paper Kites,
Oh my gosh,
who,
right?
who I didn't know that much about before. I'd heard a few of their songs, but this album is stunning.
It's so
So
special.
so special. Like the song, oh, there's so many, but like The Sweet Sound of You
Hmm.
is one of the most heartbreaking songs I've heard in a long
And that lead
time.
singer's voice
Oh,
is just amazing. And
it's
you know, it's funny because I was listening, like one of their really old songs came on yesterday when I was listening to music. And I was like, man, like this is cool for what it is, but God, they have just like perfected their sound. Like
yeah,
the growth of what they're doing now just is so nuanced and delicate. And it's like it's just exactly what it's supposed to be. It's
yeah.
great writing too.
I think they're coming to London in May, and I think I'm going to try and see them. But I find, yeah, his
Yeah.
voice sounds it's so beautifully effortless. I mean, it's obviously not effortless, but it sounds
Yeah.
effortless, and that's it. Yeah. Midnight Moon's a beautiful song. There's so many on that record that I absolutely
So
love.
many good
Yeah.
ones.
So thank you for introducing it to me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Artist spotlight of the week, Andrea. An artist that you think everyone should know about.
So it's been very cold where I've been. Real feel last week was -40. And so I've been,
Jeez.
and that's Fahrenheit. So like
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
really rough. But one artist I just love to listen to whenever I want to sort of get that summer feel is the Spanish artist Rita Paez. Um, her
Heard of
album
Rita?
with her mom is incredible. I would say just listen to all of her work. Just go on Spotify or Apple, find a Rita Paez like compilation playlist and just listen down. It's so good. It's very relaxing, beautiful voice, incredible. Her mom's an incredible classical guitarist, Elizabeth Roma,
Mm,
and they play together on a lot of these. So that is a artist spotlight I would like to throw out.
fabulous. Thank you. Um, my artist spotlight of the week, as I'm interviewing a wonderful folk musician, is another wonderful folk musician, an English folk musician called Kate Rusby. Have you heard of Kate Rusby at all?
That name sounds familiar.
She's
Kate Rusby.
stunningly good, in my
Okay,
opinion.
I'll take a listen.
It's very traditional English folk, but her voice, she's from, I don't know whereabouts in the north of England, but she has that accent when she sings, and it's beautiful. Um, a great place to start would be "Underneath the Stars" is a song of hers that's beautiful.
Okay.
Her rendition of "Blooming Heather" is stunning. I Caught It a Sailor. There's loads of great songs, but I haven't actually seen her live, and I've been meaning to for years. So I'm going to try and see her. But it's an interesting way how I found out about her. I was doing A-level music. A-levels in this country are like your final exams before you go to college. Um,
Okay.
and I was doing a music A-level, and in our um, listening exam, her song, we didn't know what was going to come on, and one of her songs came on, and I sucked at that test because the whole time I was like, who was that? I need to remember this. I need to remember the lyrics so I can find out who this is.
That's
um
so funny.
so Kate Rasby, you ruined my A-level music, thank you. So that's my artist spotlight of the week. Now I cheekily throw in a few questions that I want to be spontaneous, so
Cool.
here we go. But
Let's do it.
what what does it mean to you to be an artist, and what do you think makes a great artist, Andrea?
Mm.
It's a hard one to answer, I know, but
I think being an artist really is about um, making art that connects with people. I truly do believe like art is this sort of bizarre thing that exists so differently than most of our world. And I think that, you can be going along and you can be having a terrible day, or you can be horribly depressed, and nothing really connects to your soul in any sort of meaningful way. And then, like, you hear a song or you read something, and suddenly your life feels different. It feels lighter. Something has changed. And like, what is that? How
yeah,
does art do that?
I
And I
know.
think great art exists beyond the maker. And I think it is, the thing that connects at a soul level.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I totally agree, and I almost feel, I sometimes in my darker moments feel heard when I listen to songs. It's like, oh, it's not just me that's
We're
gone
not
through
alone.
this. We're not
We're not
alone.
alone.
It's all the
Yeah,
same shit that's been happening for millennia, and yeah.
absolutely.
um do you have, other than Paul Simon, although we can mention Paul, by the way, I didn't this is quite a funny story. I auditioned for, because I auditioned for actor musician roles quite a bit, and I auditioned and got a recall to play Paul Simon in the Simon and Garfunkel story, a
What?
European tour of that. I got a
Oh
recall. I
my
actually
gosh.
I actually didn't go to the recall because I thought it would have looked bad on my CV, because I would have then been stuck doing the Frankie Valli story for the next, it would have been that. But
Totally.
to be recalled as Paul Simon was like, oh, maybe I'm all right.
Dang. What a dream
I
that would have
know,
been.
right? So yeah, artistic role model or a few role models.
Oh yeah. I think the two guiding lights that I look to a lot in terms of art that's being made and also career that is being had would be Sufjan Stevens and Gregory Alan Isakov. And I feel like both of them have really made incredible records. I love that Sufjan has made records, but then has also done a lot of stuff for film. I
Mm,
love, like, Call Me by Your Name. He was so pivotal in that feeling the way it felt.
yeah.
And that's the art that I want to do. I want to make things that mean something. And I think Sufjan's done a great job with that. And then I feel like Gregory has written such beautiful music and also has that grassroots following. People tell me all the time, like, oh my gosh, I saw Gregory 10 years ago when he came to the Bourbon and only a couple hundred people came out. And it's like 10 years ago, he was like 34 years old. Like he had been doing it already for 8 years, 8, 9 years. And like just the longevity and the marathon approach, and like truly now,
Persistence. It's
yeah, and
so
having
admirable.
this fan base that is like truly obsessed with his music because that's what they're there for. And also, like, Gregory Isakov, like, is an organic farmer in Boulder. Like, he has a whole farm that provides to like restaurants, and he has a CSA. Like, he is like doing this because he loves it, and he also is able to do other things and turn down things because he's farming, and just like having the boldness to be like, I'm not going to play this festival because I'm doing something else that matters. Like, not
Yeah.
just living for success and fame and accolades. And I think he's really doing it for the right reasons. I've never met him. Maybe I'll meet him and be like, no, this guy's a total hack. Like, none of this is true. I've lied about all of this.
Yeah.
But from everything I've heard and everything I've read, I think that like he's really in it for the music. And it's so easy. There's to be so distracted by all the noise and to just chase what you think worked for someone, but to truly carve your own path and make choices based on what's best for you and your music and your personhood. That is so hard and so radical in this industry. So I think people that are doing that, doing it that way, I really admire.
Amen to that. Yeah. One thing you are grateful for this week, Andrea von Kampen.
Oh yeah,
I'm going
so
to
many
stop calling
things.
you Andrea von Kampen, by the way.
No, that's
Sorry.
okay. That's okay. It's 35 degrees outside. That's like 60 degrees more than last week. And so I am so grateful that I can go. Like last week, Rosie went out in the yard and she got a nosebleed. Like she couldn't even be outside. So now being able to like actually take a walk in my neighborhood safely, I mean, that's huge.
I mean, this is crazy because now I feel stupid because it wasn't that cold. But my one thing I'm grateful for is the very cold weather ceasing somewhat. So we've got similar similar things. It's not as
It's
cold
all
here, but
relative though, isn't it? It's all relative.
we never have extreme weather in the UK. It's always just slightly shitty all the time. So whenever there's any dip in anything, we're just but yeah, but actually that's now been followed by two back-to-back storms. So but to be honest, I don't mind that as much as the cold. I suffer quite badly in the cold. So I'm
Mm.
grateful for that, and I'm very much looking forward to spring when Andrea's album will be out.
Oh man, me too. Me too.
um if there was one thing you could change about the music industry, what would it be?
Um, so yeah, I think getting back to what we were talking about labels, I
Mm,
wish there was a way that the people who worked in the industry were more understood art more and weren't just doing it for money. I wish that this didn't have to just at the end of the day always be about money. And I wish that artists weren't so exploited for their art. And I know it's like a really difficult cycle to break. I know it is as old as time, but that's
mm,
like one of the main things. And then the other thing would be I would love to see a day where we still are not fighting sexism. There still is so many opportunities that are harder for women to get in this industry. And,
mm,
especially in the terms of in studios, audio engineer, people behind the scenes working, it's still just so hard. And there's very little support for women touring, working mothers touring. There's just still a lot of an uphill battle that women have to fight to be in this industry. And so I would like to see a day where it becomes even more equal.
thank you very much. um is there anything you want to promote? You've got lots of things to promote, so now's your chance.
Yeah, so I have an album coming out on March 15th, Sister Moon, and then North American tour starting in the East Coast in March, and then we'll be hitting up the West Coast in April. And yeah, those are kind of the main things right now.
I'll put all of Andrea's social media handles in the episode notes. But Andrea, I just want to say thank you so much again. I reached
Yeah,
out
thanks for having
and
me.
you took a chance on me, and it was a real it's been a real pleasure, and I've been very very nervous because
You don't need well, you're a good actor because I cannot tell.
oh, thank you very much. And on that note, we'll leave it. And thank you very much, Andrea. I appreciate
Yeah, thank you.
it.